1, 2, 3, 4. I'm drinking with the devil in an old ghost town. We've been pounding shots since the sun went down. Hey, 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 hey. Honey, won't you put on your Sunday dress? When you're drinking with the devil, well, you better look your best. Hey, hey. And I don't give a damn what the preacher man say. I'll be drinking with the devil on Judgment Day. I'm drinking with the devil in an empty saloon, raising our glasses to the harvest moon. Hey, hey. Drinking moonshine whiskey from a broken cup. I don't need a watch to tell me my time is up. Hey, hey. And I don't give a damn what the preacher man say. I'll be drinking with the devil on Judgment Day. Devil and it's plain to see the very last round's gonna be on me. No, there ain't no saving my worthless soul. Just put a quarter in the jukebox and give me that rock and roll. And I don't give a damn what the preacher man say. I'll be drinking with the devil on Judgment Day. I'm drinking with the devil and I'm feeling just swell. Me and old Scratch gonna raise some hell. Hey, 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 hey. So for another pint of your blackest stout, I'll be tossing them back till the bottom falls right out. Hey, hey. And I don't give a damn what the preacher man say. I'll be drinking with the devil on Judgment Day. No, I don't give a damn what the preacher man say. I'll be drinking with the devil on Judgment Day.
And welcome to the Crash Chords podcast. And that was Painless Parker, who's our guest today. Say hello, Painless.
Howdy, folks. How you doing?
He will play a couple more songs later in the show.
So stick around.
Yes.
We have to tell people to do that, because, you know...
Because otherwise they'll leave if we don't tell them.
Well, you're certainly not engaging enough.
They'll get up and walk away.
You're just mad because I riffed you really good before we started recording.
That's true, but it's not on air. Yay!
Yeah, lucky you. We'll make fun of you later. It's fine. We'll get back to it.
All right.
There's really no news this week. I've got no
No
big
news,
announcements.
everybody.
Yeah. Shockingly, there's no announcement this week, so I think we can get right into the album for this week.
Good.
Wow, Steve. Could you bring any more energy to the podcast?
He can,
I am
but he
bringing
won't.
energy.
Yeah, he won't.
So, our album this week is brought to us by our guest. It's the Carolina Chocolate Drops and their new album, Leaving Eden.
Introduced to us by Painless.
So, are you a longtime fan of this band?
Semi-short time fan,
Okay.
I'd say. I don't remember exactly how I chanced upon them, but I'm very happy I did. I think somebody recommended them to me, probably.
And you've listened to other records before this one?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Yeah, because this was a completely new experience for me. I mean, I've heard music like this before, but them specifically I hadn't heard before.
Well, we've done folk, but not folk.
Yeah.
Legit Americana.
For all of you on the audio world, he made his eyes really big when he said folk the second time, to emphasize it.
So necessary. You wonder why I like energy. Seriously.
But to be honest, this is not a pure folk album. There's a heavy dosage of blues throughout the whole piece.
Well, one of the things that I like about this album, what I like about this band especially, the Carolina Chocolate Drops, what's interesting about them, they're doing... As their name may imply, they are from North Carolina. And what they're doing is trying to keep alive the traditions of sort of old-time fiddle and folk music that were practiced in the Carolinas in the African-American communities. All the members of the band are black, and they do a lot of music that we usually associate with white people in Appalachia. Old fiddle and banjo stuff that a lot of it, especially banjo music, actually came from African Americans who came over as slaves and brought the banjo and its ancestors with them. And they're sort of doing a lot to keep the tradition alive, both in terms of playing a lot of old stuff and also writing new things and incorporating new sounds and keeping it modern, so making it a living tradition, writing new stuff in the mode of that kind of folk music, of North Carolina folk music, with fiddle and banjo and other traditional instruments, and making it modern.
Is that when you say white people in Appalachia? Is that because they borrowed the music and then went to Appalachia thereafter? Or
It's a question of, well, what I'm thinking about, like what a lot of people in folk circles talk about is old time music, which for the most part, when people say that, they mean Appalachian music from the areas of Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, that has a lot of roots in Anglo-Scots Irish traditions that came over. So fiddle tunes that came over from England, Ireland, and Scotland, and then sort of melded with other stuff and mutated a little bit. In fact, what was really interesting is that some British researchers of old traditional English ballads recorded a lot of stuff in the late 18 and early 1900s in the Appalachians, because some of their really early ballads were sort of preserved in a closer form to their original in these small, isolated mountain communities of, what we would call hillbillies, basically, today.
it's really fascinating, considering we were having a discussion at some point recently in the podcast about how language gets preserved also in certain little pockets, like the old British, the original British Cockney accent, as we think of it, got preserved in certain little pockets of Virginia here and there. The island of Tangiers, for instance, there was a whole theory going about that was actually the original provincial British accent, but it got preserved.
And by we, meaning Steve talked about it, and
We nodded.
me and Matt just...
Well, we got into it when we were
That
talking
I do
about...
not remember the episode on, so you got me.
Well,
Wow.
Musically in the Appalachians, you get a lot of sort of Irish and English traditions that started melding. You starting hearing banjo music, and the banjo came from Africa with the slaves. Later on, you start to hear some blues influences, and that was what got worked into bluegrass and country music in the 30s and 40s. But what was interesting, and I learned this only recently, is for a lot of stuff, even as far north as New England, the kind of music white people would listen to at dances, often there would be a black fiddler playing it.
Right.
And they would play certain music for white people at dances and certain music in their own communities.
Interesting.
Well, it's also important to note here that I don't think Carolina Chocolate Drops were staying entirely classic, because they did incorporate certain modern elements in here. It was kind of sporadic, but when you heard them, you heard them. Anyone could recognize a little R&B here and there.
Some of their earlier albums were very much straight up trad. They were, just that kind of music with the instrumentation and just like the old fiddle tunes that they had learned from their mentors. But the last 2 or 3 albums they started intentionally doing that more, adding modern elements, adding modern instruments to just try to, be like, well, we're not just recreating something from the past, but we're building on this tradition. We're making it a real thing, because all music should be like that. No music should just be about curating and putting music in a museum. It should also be about creating new things within a genre, within style, about working within folk music or within jazz or blues or whatever you're doing, and making new things, making it, because it never stood still. Back in the day, folk music was always changing, especially before recording, when you only had oral tradition. Every fiddler is going to play a tune differently. Every banjo player is going to play it differently.
Of course. I think that's probably going to be a
you
crux
get that
of this
mutation
discussion.
and pollination of influences all the time. It's a fascinating thing, and some people who tend to be real purists about folk music kind of forget that.
Yeah.
That's actually...
These guys have not.
Yeah.
That's something
I think
we
that'll be
actually
the discussion as to how well they're doing that, as to how well, I guess, they're bringing the old or introducing the new, and that careful balance.
Let's get right into the first track, Riro's...
Ryro.
Ryro's?
Ryro.
That's actually because the way you said it in the in the lyrics.
Riro's... Ryro's house. There we go.
That took too long.
Yeah,
Just too long.
way too long. Is the first track on the record a nice kind of high energy intro, tons of fill
Very
in the beginning.
energizing.
Yeah,
That-
it kind
that
of
was-
pulls you right in.
That's the first thing I heard, especially in the beat work, especially in the percussion work. It was something that instantly grabbed you, brought you to a high energy level, a get up and dance kind of a level. It did my opinion, did a great job of actually showcasing the strings, what we were going to get to expect in the rest of the album, the tempo we were going to get to expect, the craftsmanship we were going to get.
I agree.
And also, chord-wise, I mean, let's put it this way. This is the pop music of the day, which the day could be anywhere between, like, the late 19th century to probably present, because it survives in many places, in pockets. And it tends to stay within a form. Sometimes it can be kind of a rigid form, but that's exactly what John was saying. They tend to play around with texture a lot, with the instrumentation. But I would say that it's kind of an exploration as to what you can do with, say, one chord or two chords, or in the blues cases on this album, the blues style. It's like an exploration as to how much you can actually do within that small framework. And for that said, I mean, as an intro track, it works wonderfully, because it's supposed to be high energy. You're not really supposed to be getting into the deep stuff right away, you know, the chordal heavy pieces. This is, it's fun.
Yeah. I agree that it really sets the tone for the rest of the album, both in terms of, it starts out, you know, you got your banjo and fiddle, which are kind of the classic hallmarks of Southern music, of this kind of Southern folk music, where they're coming from. And they set it out with that as the bass, but they also have this percussion going. I think there was some bones in there. There's definitely a snare drum doing a sort of a polyrhythm. And, you know, as I was saying, these guys are, you know, showcasing an African-American tradition, and polyrhythms are a very important thing that, you know, black slaves sort of introduced into Western music in many forms, both in blues and rock later on. But even here, you get the sort of dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun of the fiddle and banjo. Yeah, and then you got this. You got the drum coming in, being like, okay, this is not your normal white people's fiddle music. This is going to be a little bit different,
right? And
some of it's going to be different, but still traditional. But you never realized it was traditional, and some of it's going to break out of that entirely.
Yeah, and it was I think, as far as intro tracks go, really sets the tone, and it was short and sweet, but not too short.
It's a declaration of intent.
Yeah, it definitely stayed as long. For a 2-minute track, it was kind of perfect for the beginning of the record. It was a great way to start us off.
And of course, this is also very characteristic of the genre. Great use of double stops, that fiddle style playing where you know, constantly hammering down on 2 or 3 strings at once, and often, at least that tended to be the high point of the piece. Even though, you know, we don't think of the piece as being very versatile within its small framework, it does have those moments which are a little bit more interesting than others. For instance, it really is just going back between those 2 chords, like I said, between C and G, and then when it falls in that G, that's where the violin tends to get more interesting. That's where it tends to put in double stops in more of a... It states it in a more intriguing manner. That said to me that this wasn't going to be, I guess, your everyday folk album, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It definitely does. There was hints, though you couldn't tell to what extent this early on, but there were definitely hints that this was going to definitely go somewhere besides your standard fiddle folk music. There's going to be more to it than that.
Yeah, like
it had dimensions even from the very beginning.
An example, for instance, is like the Chieftains.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I know the Chieftains quite well.
I mean, in more of an Irish sense.
Yeah,
I would actually say that they tend to stay more in a bit of a standard. Like there's very little variation in genre for most of their work. Whereas here, there's a little bit of waning, place to place.
No, yeah, I hear that. Moving on to track 2, which was I thought it was an odd choice to kind of have this short little, almost an interlude track, but this was Carr's Negro Jig, and it was just. It
did have a jig
element,
as
it gets.
Yeah,
but I think that the really nice touch on this track was the wildlife in the background. Really brought home the purity of the jig.
I felt like something they played in the bar,
for instance.
Yeah,
in the bar, played in the porch.
It could easily be cheesy, but it wasn't.
It wasn't cheesy. It really gave you that. It gave you a framework.
Good.
It gave an honesty to it, even though it is throwing on crickets, wildlife type of a feel onto a track. Because, but it did the opposite. It made it more earnest.
I think it had to do with the rustic feel of the instrument itself. It's very. It's not crisp in a sense, you know, that we know when we're listening to very carefully produced studio work. This is one microphone, basic, simple microphone, nothing expensive here. There was some care put toward not making sure there was too much care put on this album, or at least in the recording work itself.
Sort of a sonic sprezzatura, if you will.
I don't know
you
what
might
any of
need to
that
explain
means.
that.
Yeah.
Sprezzatura is an Italian term that is most often used in fashion circles, and it's been actually rather abused in fashion circles, but it's sort of the idea of doing things without too much care, making everything sort of nonchalant. So putting great care into appearing effortless.
Right.
So often in fashion it means doing something just a little bit wrong in terms of like style faux pas, just to like not have everything perfect and matchy.
For
and it was
instance,
something that came out of the Renaissance and was out of a sort of an idea of like how to be the perfect courtier in court, and they'd actually intentionally throw off bon mots with slightly misquoted quotes, so as to seem like you look up a quote the night before to like spout it off in court, but you misquote it on purpose, so that
Right.
seems like you're
You have this
misremembering
knowledge,
it.
but it's not worth remembering.
But I'm not actually. I just kind of remembered it. Oh, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I just threw these clothes
And
on.
the
and, like,
implementation
yeah,
of
the
this
socks don't
particular
quite
case-
match, but
It was mostly because it was out of tune, like very blatantly out of tune. I don't have perfect pitch by any means, but I just a sense that it was out of tune, and then I double checked it, and it clearly was like right there in between two notes. So
Yeah.
just that in itself,
what's nice about it was also like it was sort of a more. The sound of the banjo was very, very, very kind of like harkened back to some very early banjo playing and like the history of the instrument, kind of piratey almost in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And,
this
totally.
take you back through the
And
centuries.
you could hear some like there was some percussive elements that sound like foot shuffling, which is something that goes right back to slavery.
Yeah.
The shuffle
absolutely.
dance and using shuffle percussion, and both in the name of the tune, that's a jig, and in the sort of the minor kind of Dorian thing it had going on, it showcased very strongly the Irish roots that this kind of music has.
Yeah, and you can even hear it in the melody, especially the whole pirate thing.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You could
And
hear
the-
that.
it was
what do you do with
definitely-
the drunken sailor kind of melody?
Yeah,
Very,
it's-
a lot of similar phrases there.
It was definitely a melody that probably originated somewhere in Ireland and mutated a little bit, but not that much that it sounded purely Southern.
Yeah.
You could trace it back. You could smell that little bit of the Irish peat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think all things together, considering the
Smell
crickets.
the clover.
I got drunken sailor stuck in my head now.
There you go.
Moving on to track 3.
This was the first time we're really getting a more modern take on folk. This was first time we were really getting some stand up vocal work too. Rudy, are you mad at your man? The female lead vocalist is. It's not appropriate to compare her to Janis Joplin, but it's the closest I can get.
You thought there were style similarities. I mean, she definitely had a very powerful voice and was very.
It was that frog in the throat element that
But it was
Janis
very-
always had that really shone through here.
But it was very engaging from the beginning. The song had a great backbeat, and the vocals were really good. It was another high energy song that kind of really got you going.
This was a level of vocal skill that you didn't quite get in Ryro's House. I mean, that's something that almost anybody could kind of, I guess, belt out if you just have a couple days of vocal lessons. This is completely different. This shows years of spending time on your art.
Honing your voice.
There's a very important mathematical equation that sort of happens in the song, and that is that beatbox plus banjo equals awesome.
Yeah.
There is beatboxing in this song. I think we really need to talk about it.
Okay,
there is a dude.
We're getting to that. We had to get to that. The beatboxing was. I haven't heard anything as good since Surge. Number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, it is very subtle, where it actually does sound like almost a drum. At times, it's a very subtle beatbox that, until you hear that sharp intake breath, you don't realize it's actually someone doing that with their voice. I loved it. I thought it was excellent.
I mean, in the beginning, it sounds almost completely drum-like. When you have that sort of heartbeat and, the bump, 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 bump. And then it starts getting gradually more complex. You hear different pitches within that drum. And it starts getting so high-pitched that it starts to feel as if it's tablas, that Indian drum. It starts to sound a little bit like that until it goes right into the full blown chorus. Then there's a human element there.
Yeah.
And it's impressive that it works, because it's the kind of thing that could easily fall on its face, and they actually make it work really nicely. It works with the banjo. They got a mandolin coming in and doing some little melody.
It did excellent work with that playful mandolin. It was the fun back and forth that was.
And
this is copying it at its best.
And the mandolin, like the kind of melody lines that the mandolin was doing, was actually referencing them also slightly anachronistically for very early folk music. It was kind of referencing bluegrass, which is very much a 1940s phenomenon. Bluegrass was something that happened in the 40s and the 50s, right around the time rock and roll was coming together. It's not like there's a difference between bluegrass and like old time folk. They are not the same thing.
Yeah.
And what the mandolin was doing was much more like something you'd hear Bill Monroe playing.
And I really like when very genre specific seeming bands break outside those walls. And the fact that they worked a beatbox so well into this otherwise very folky, bluegrassy kind of sound was really great.
Well, it was great about all these things that came together, and like the use of dynamics and the variance of dynamic, the way things went from like
that was
sort
my
of
favorite
slow
part
and
about
menacing
this
and quiet, and to like building up into like crescendos and diminuendos going on.
It
in
had
the song.
specifically
Was beautifully done.
Specifically
good
toward
builds.
the end, you pull the beatbox completely out.
And it was that slow burn.
Very soft for a while.
We always talk about the slow burn kind of a build. It did a hell of a job bringing all the elements together.
And that's just the thing. That's something you could not get on a tailor-made, properly, quote unquote, properly produced album. You wouldn't get those dynamics because there's actually, the RIFF standard actually does not allow for that. I mean, it may still very well be compressed, but you can hear past it. You can hear that the raw recording of this was teeming with peaks and valleys.
I mean, even just like the difference between just if you're playing a drum, say just hitting the bass note as opposed to doing a full fill.
Yeah.
And you hear that in the beatbox, and you hear that in the banjo playing. You hear that in the vocals, the way she'll go from so like sticking to the verse to like doing longer legato notes that sort of float over everything while the rhythmic elements are still driving, and she's doing these sort of long phrases.
Yeah, and it was interesting that even the banjo itself still had that dynamic, considering that the banjo was mostly just it served the purpose of a rhythm guitarist. I mean, basic, ubiquitous throughout the track, except for dynamics. Same exact riff, but dynamics did alter. And when you hear your rhythm section, grow in volume, I think that's almost what's a little bit unexpected for this genre.
And it's just nice to, as much as I like a finely produced track, the fact that there were imperfections in there and that cliche, imperfections build character, it really did give the song a kind of character that you wouldn't have gotten. It was this fine, polished product,
I think a lot of it, what it is that like production can sometimes be used to make up for like mediocre things, and you need less production when the band you're recording is super tight.
Yeah.
And like I've seen footage online, I've seen videos of these guys when they're playing. They are incredibly good musicians.
Yeah.
They know their stuff inside and out. They can be as loose as they want, they can be as tight as they want.
And also this style allows them to be a little looser, and they have that room to do that.
When a band is really good and has been playing long enough with each other, they can do a certain kind of interplay where they slow down a bit or speed up, and you can you almost develop a sort of telepathy.
Yeah, where you kind of follow
anticipate what everybody's going to do, and
Yeah,
we actually talked about that sort of connection when we were doing Chick Corea with jazz.
Yeah,
it's once you know each other, It's what fingers are going to happen at what times.
That's interesting you bring that up, considering that was a fairly new band that was created, him and The Vigil at least.
Yeah.
But yet Chick Corea himself,
he's scary good.
It's intuitive. It's intuition at that point.
Yeah.
But
sometimes all you need is one really good ringleader.
Yeah, exactly.
Who will make it happen.
Well, it's like
these guys. I mean, they ring of having years with each other, spend time.
This actually, again, this is. I believe for this album they actually had a new member. One of their original members had left, and the guy who does the beatboxing was new on this album.
Oh,
but I'm pretty sure they workshopped it a whole lot before they got there.
Yeah, and you can tell.
And this is a band that they tour, they play. This is what they do.
Do you know if there's any multi-instrumentalists here, or is everyone basically to their own form?
No, they're all multi-instrumentalists. Let's see. The only one I remember the name of is Rhiannon Giddens, who's the vocalist, the female singer. She plays banjo, she plays fiddle. I think the guy who just joined them plays guitar and beatboxing and banjo. They all do a bunch of stuff.
And that adds
they are all multi-instrumentalists, so it's...
And that adds to
Yeah.
the flexibility of the band, and that's very apparent, too. Moving on to Boodle Dee Bum Bum.
Boodly bum bum.
Boodly bum bum.
Boodly Bum Bum.
Boodly bum.
Don't be afraid.
This track is clearly, and I mean, Painless pretty much said it while we were listening to it. It's a very jug band rock song. It's just kind of a fun rock folky jug band song. I mean,
not rock. Rock is the wrong word. Blues is a more appropriate word.
was it more bluesy?
Well, I mean, yeah, jug music had connections with the blues. They were very
Okay.
close.
All right.
It was sort of its own thing. Tended to get on the radio a bit more.
Right.
A lot of jug band music was sort of about finding new sounds. So, like the idea of like the jug and the washtub bass. It's not that these guys were two Porter Ford instruments. It's just
Right.
that they were looking for different kinds of sounds.
Yeah.
Kind of like
And-
Robert Johnson, the whole bottle, the guitar and whatnot.
Well, I mean,
That
that
was
was something that
invented
came
that.
from Hawaii, actually. There was a craze for Hawaiian music.
Was it
in
really?
The 20s. Yeah. The first guys to start playing slide guitar, and I think they actually did it with like a knife or something, were Hawaiians. And there was a craze for that stuff in the 20s, and that filtered into the Delta blues in Mississippi.
Huh, I had always heard that Robert Johnson was the progenitor of that.
No.
Misinformation?
He was one of the best practitioners,
There you
but
are.
he neither introduced slide to the blues or was the first slide blues player.
Gotcha.
This track,
Anyway,
Speaking
yeah,
of this.
back to jug
Yeah.
band music.
So this track was definitely more on the it felt simple, but there were still complexities within it.
It was very classic in both the style it was portrayed in and its progression.
Yeah, it's
This
tone.
one was like straight up traditional.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was not trying to do anything new. This was very much just being like, this is where we're coming from. This is our history and our heritage, and we're not messing with it too much.
I mean, my overall only real complaint with the track was that it felt like it went on a little too long. It could have had one less verse chorus and probably would have wrapped up just nicely.
Yeah,
There
well,
there
what
was,
they
like-
wanted, they wanted to give room for the solos, but the
And
problem
there was
is
a
that
story too.
There's some fun like banjo mandolin interplay on this one, but there was really no dynamic range. It all kind of sat
Yeah.
in the same way and sort of shuffled along at the same kind of like shuffling jug band pace.
and I think that's why the solos don't really hit you the same way, because when there's no dynamic range,
Yeah.
the solos just sort of are casually introduced. You barely even notice that the verse has been pulled out.
Yeah.
So
I mean, all in all, it was an okay track. Just I think if they had cut like a 30 seconds to a minute
It's a little
out,
too uniform to be that long.
especially
Yeah.
considering following up Rudy, which was nothing uniform at all. It was
Yeah.
very original. But maybe they were trying to bring you down a bit, especially considering track 5, what that's going to be when we get to it.
And what's weird is track 5, Country Girl, and Ruby was very similar in styles, or at least in elements. And it was kind of weird to have this jug band pigeonholed between them, because Country Girl, once again introducing the beatbox, even better this time around.
I mean,
More rock, even, to some extent. This one-
R&B. I can't.
R&B.
Rock
It's
rock is
definitely
an
R&B.
incorrect word for anywhere on this album, in my opinion.
Modern pop, definitely
Yeah.
leaning
There was-
towards
yeah,
the
modern
R&B
pop,
hip hop
yeah.
spectrum.
Rock is a gleam in the eyes of these.
Yeah.
So we're on to
Well, honestly, though,
so we're on to Country Girl, and here we're really having a break from tradition.
yeah. But I think that's
Because
why.
up until now, we've had subtle changes. Like, I'm going to go so far as even to say that the beatboxing that we get in Ruby Are You Mad at Your Man is subtle.
Yeah.
It's playing around with a drum rhythm that would still
It's
be
adding
present.
a modern element to something that is
Yeah.
still within the framework of a traditional
That's
song. This
more
is
about
no
aesthetic
longer,
than anything.
This whole thing, everything is built around a modern framework of a modern pop song.
It's
Yeah.
the style of her singing.
Yeah.
It's just it rings like any
And,
R&B.
and what I love about this track also is called Country Girl, but it's anything but country, the song. Maybe what she's describing, but as far as the style.
Lyrically, it was almost trope-filled.
Yeah. It was very cliche, singing about the country life.
And that was probably the only detractor in this song for me, that it
Yeah.
was such a trope heavy lyric style, but her vocals were even better. They're getting better, which is great.
I
Yeah.
kind of felt like, I don't know, the phrasing was a little forced in this one. It's trying to fit too much in. I didn't like this track, to be honest. I felt like it was too much of a departure. Like, the elements didn't quite meld. It was sort of like trying to say something, but not really as artfully as it could. It just, like, for me, something about it didn't gel. Like, it kind of missed its mark.
That's fair. I'm going to go and disagree, though, only because I feel like the subtleties so far have almost been pointless. It's not that I didn't enjoy a track like Ruby Are You Mad at Your Man, but it's like that subtle variation of an existing song. It doesn't add too much to me from what I could get from existing recordings, of the era. This, to me, I couldn't find elsewhere, and I did enjoy that. So whether you think it gelled, I guess it's a matter of opinion.
I feel like it's like, I mean, I can see your point about Ruby, but I feel like this goes a little too far in the other direction. It's like too disjointed at this point. It's like basically playing. They're using their instruments to play a pop song.
That may have to do with track placement more than anything. The fact that we had that, the boodly bum bum in the middle there. It's like
I just think it's a weak song.
Eh.
I think with this song,
it's a context question to me.
I think with this song it comes down to more personal taste than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the reason that you feel it doesn't gel is just the reasons why I do like it. The fact that it's a little off, and the fact that it's got that very strong hip hop song style. But I can definitely see where you're coming from, especially as far as based on their other music on the rest of the record. This is definitely sticks out like a sore thumb compared to anything else we come across for the rest of the record.
Chord-wise, it's a little bit more interesting to me. I mean, we had a discussion of the whole three.
There was enjoyable breakdowns. It was a little more divergent.
One of those breakdowns is the cello itself.
Yes.
Yeah. That's new. That's new for the record. This
is the first time it comes
jump
in.
outish. So I could see it being sudden in terms of a track placement question, but it doesn't stop my enjoyment of this. If anything, it needed a more gradual build to it, but I'm not displeased that it occurred.
Moving to Run Mountain, which is the track that follows Country Girl. This was, I mean, it kind of went more back to a more traditional sound right after Country Girl.
Yeah,
this one, there was one element that I did enjoy, and that was the fife, the woodwind.
Yeah.
I liked that infused in it, but it felt almost to the extent of she'll be coming around the mountain, like that overplayed of a song. It really...
The fife, I mean, comes in later in the album too, and I think it was better used here.
This was so...
It was a jaunty track, but it was kind of just...
It was tired.
Yeah, it wasn't very...
The fife adds
original.
a more earthy texture, but that's not like we've been lacking that anywhere in this album so
I
far.
like the fife on this. I think it's something that you don't... Like, back in its day, like, fife and drum bands were very prevalent in the South and very much part of the music, and you don't hear... You hear a lot more about fiddles and banjos and occasionally mandolins than you do the fife and drum stuff, and it's kind of nice to have. It's a little bit exotic, but still very much part of that tradition, and something that was very much a part of African American music making tradition, which is something that's important to this band.
Well, see, aesthetically, I agree. It's even exotic for this record, but the form of the song didn't really go enough places for it to really stand out as me.
It's not a super standout track because again they're doing something that is straight up traditional within the old fashioned Appalachian mode.
Yeah.
I like a lot of the old traditional stuff anyway, so for me personally, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because
I guess
they do good renditions, and like I like I don't remember which one of them sings on this track. It's one of the guys, but I like it's sort of a slightly rougher voice.
Yeah.
And it's a bit more country. It's a bit more rural.
Yeah.
I can never pronounce that word properly. Rural, just two R's, just like they mess with me, man.
Yeah.
But I like that kind of bit of a roughness in the vocal.
It seems that over the course of these tracks, there's going to be a lot of question between whether you prefer the subtle shift or prefer the hardcore transition. Really smacking you in the face with originality.
Because the next one we're coming up on.
Leaving Eden, yeah. So this
Leaving Eden, which is also much more of a modern track in its way.
And this is the title track of the record.
But this one is much stronger, I feel, than Country Girl was.
Oh, I will agree. I would
I'll
definitely
say
agree with that. Hands down.
The cello's kicking butt left
Yeah,
and right.
the cello was beautiful, and it was engrossing from second one of this song. You're pulled right in with her singing.
What was beautiful was the way the cello complemented her vocals, and I think this might be the best vocals on the album.
For sure, it's up there. Yeah,
straight up.
Was I mistaken, or was there an upright bass in here as well?
Possibly.
it could be. I don't.
There's
remember.
a lot of complexity in this song.
There's a lot of times on this album when you think you hear a bass and they're actually on a jug.
Yeah, that happens.
I don't remember if it
times.
was on this one, but
and this is the first time I really found myself engaged with not just the vocals but also the lyrics. I especially like it the first time she goes into the chorus, and the mockingbird can sing like the crying of a dove. When that line strikes, it goes from this sweet, slow melody to something a lot more energized, quite a bit more upbeat, but still have that same sort of sorrow to it. I love I love the way she uses her voice.
This one definitely does have that kind of more modern pop feel also.
Not even necessarily modern pop feel. But go ahead.
I mean, as far as... maybe pop's the wrong word as far
modern
as... Modern
form.
Yeah, it has a modern form that seems like more accessible to the average listener. Someone who may not be looking for this kind of a style, but it will engage just about anyone who hears it.
I think those reasons are all chordal. I mean,
absolutely.
This is easily the most complex track on the album, and it is, incidentally, my favorite. It tends to go through a lot more of the motions than any other track here. Most, like I said in the very beginning, are just exploring those, one chord here, another chord there, doing your typical blues progression. This was always moving. It really didn't stop to ponder in any sense.
This was sort of like, this song was very much about the song, about the lyrics happening, and the music all around it and supporting it. Like a lot of the other stuff we're hearing, a lot of these old traditional tunes, they were dance tunes, so they didn't have to be complex. They didn't have to have a lot of chords.
But at the same time, this is no less a dance tune to me, because it is a waltz after all, and I do see movement to this track. Just because it's complex, I mean, doesn't negate it being a dance tune.
Not saying it's not, but it's a lot more than that. Yeah, it stands on. It's like a lot of.
If anything, this is the romantic dance tune.
Yeah, this is your slow dance, and it's a gorgeous one.
It really is.
And what I was actually going to say about modern, it's like what I feel it's doing is it's in a modern folk form. This reminds me of a Gillian Welch song, or other people who are doing sort of more contemporary singer-songwriter folk. It's sort of in that mode, still very much in sort of like a tradition that came out of bluegrass and what people nowadays talk about as roots or Americana.
Yeah.
So it's very much sort of that modern roots kind of thing, and just like, and it's a beautiful example of that.
Right, and also this is
the craftsmanship, musical craftsmanship at its finest.
It's the layering in particular for me that really makes it just the tasteful introduction with each and every instrument. It's like whether it was a jug or an upright bass, it's neither here nor there, but. And it joins in with that tremolo, which actually is a running theme with this album. So it doesn't separate this track entirely for me. The fast mandolin tremolo, and then the cello enters after that, and the harmonies between when both the female and male singer join in together, which doesn't often happen on this album, at least not stated in such a profound manner.
Not in the way that feels like a duet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the harmonies there were glorious.
And for also with me, this track also is the first time you really get a sense of emotion in the album. I mean, there are pockets here, but they don't really take you through a huge amount of emotion through the whole album, depending on what you're looking for. But here, the beauty here is so outwardly stated, and the lyrics and the singing is pushed so far to the forefront, and the music is clearly just supporting it, like you said, that you can't help but feel something. It'll well up in you.
It's the emotional climax of the album.
Yeah, there's also...
absolutely.
The other songs have been more about adrenaline, energy, or the removing of that
because of the
adrenaline.
dance behind it, yeah.
This one really is more trying to make you feel instead of just do.
Yeah, there's definitely more layers to this track, and it shows.
Again, it depends on where you're putting your emphasis with this, because I can't go so far as to say that tracks like Boodly Bum Bum or Run Mountain are filler tracks, because
they're not.
No, they're almost the focus.
But we're not saying
right.
that.
But it's true that this is the climax in a sense. It seems like you're almost bypassing them to get here. But I'm just
so
proposing.
I think there are tracks on this album that are more like interludes.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd say which have their value.
They have their value, but that's what the only thing
They're not the big set pieces.
I personally do feel that they're interludes, but I'm just proposing an alternate view because, on one hand, this album is all about that in many ways. It's all about the fun. It's all about the dance. And it doesn't seem like there's a sad focus in this album, which would almost make Leaving Eden seem out of place, despite that it is the climax. It depends on where you see the focus.
There is some more downer style coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, like
it's not such an oddball out. There is some more melancholy coming up later on in the album.
And speaking of the filler tracks, this track could arguably be considered one. So track 8 is called Read 'em John. It's an all a cappella track.
There's a good part.
All right, well, we'll get to that. But so this is an all a cappella track. My overall thoughts on it was fun, but it kind of lacked that extra something. Like even tracks like Boodly Bum Bum had, even though it was simpler, it still had something, like that little bit of extra. Whereas this kind of just felt kind of empty.
It felt sort of like the song that never ends.
It just
at some point, but then they did introduce something which we've talked about this way back on other albums, but there was clapping, and that rhythmic clapping actually did something for me.
And it wasn't just like clapping, like clap, clap. They were doing polyrhythms with them.
Yeah,
it was
they
good.
They might have even been ham-boning.
It was.
I'm not sure.
It was some good work, but it took half the song to get to it.
And it's just, I don't feel it was
but it wasn't
enough.
that long.
It wasn't that long.
It was a very short
I think
track,
Painless kind of had it when he called it a sea shanty. It's basically what I feel throughout this. It has to do with the a cappella style. The fact that we do have many 18th century vibes going into other points of this album, it seemed to be accentuated here.
And it
aside from the soul aspect.
It did actually keep almost a round style beat going throughout it. It was
could have very easily been around.
Very much a metronome in its beat.
I will say it's not the strongest thing on the album. I liked it.
Yeah,
I like the vocal. I like how the sort of the lead male vocal on this was a bit shouty, a little bit ragged.
Yeah,
There's a certain amount of like emotion to it, like a bit of rowdiness.
It made it raw. Yeah,
that I like, and it didn't overstay its welcome.
No, yeah, I didn't hate the track. It's just the chorus to me just kind of rubbed me a little wrong. But it's for the same reasons that kind of rubbed me wrong is why you like it. It had that kind of harsher, rougher sound.
It's just because
that I just didn't love.
It's a simple question of a simple. Well, I basically have better taste in music than you, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, everybody here has better taste in music than him.
Sure.
Oh, come on. Pacific Rim.
4 Rubistink albums, dude.
I own them. I haven't listened to them in ages, but yes,
there
I
you go.
Anyway.
And now to our palate cleanser, and I want to say this was Mahala was a great palate cleanser. This was something that I think really helped divide the beginning and the end of the album very well to sort of reboot it for me. This was a couple people said, I don't remember who, said a Polynesian style beat. It felt Caribbean, it felt
That was I.
East Indies, West Indies. It felt tropical in its style.
Mm-hmm.
Yet wasn't. It really wasn't. The beat was
it
the
was
tropical
well described.
You could have replaced every instrument here with a ukulele, and you wouldn't have skipped a beat.
Yeah,
and it was great for that.
Except then you would have a bunch of goddamn ukuleles.
Yeah, there's
that. So yeah, I mean, Painless had said while we were listening to it off air, it was the summer jam of the 1930s. It kind of had that kind of summery feel, but it was definitely a 1930s kind of sound.
Yes, people went to the beach then too.
Sure, beaches existed.
It reminded me of some stuff that Mike Seeger did. He did this album of. It was called I think it was called Fresh Old Time Sounds, and the idea was to take some old time music and keep it a living tradition, do something different. And he played with a lot of people who were part of this scene in Ithaca, New York, in the '70s when the album was done. And they did a version of Cotton Eye Joe, which was sort of almost Aloha Oi, and sort of like, "Where did you come from? Where did you go?" Ba-bum, ba-bum. It was almost like this kind of like doo-woppy / Hawaiian thing. So this kind of thing is not unprecedented. Well, honestly, I found it pretty boring.
There wasn't much to this track. I mean, I don't really have much other to say than
not a lot of meat on the bones.
Well, summer jams really aren't meant to be impressive necessarily.
Yeah,
you even fit a mood.
You even compared it to the way it kind of flowed to Sugar Ray's song "Every Morning," and "Every Morning" is a lot of things, but substance, it's not. It's a pop track that was supposed to kind of get you grooving in the summer. It was very vapid, very.
It goes back and forth. The 20s and 30s. American music in the 20s and 30s tended to borrow a lot from almost everywhere. Latin rhythms, African rhythms, Asian rhythms. They borrowed everything, and then they would put it into this box, which was the 20s and 30s standards of the time. And he would feed it through that. They've done amazing things by utilizing the music of the world, and they've also done so many not amazing things, and I think this is on the lower half of that spectrum.
But that's why I'm going to say it's a great palate cleanser, because it was, in some ways, mindless. It was enough to take stuff like...
It gave you a break, I guess.
It took the emotions of leaving Eden and the randomness of Read 'em John and made me forget about them, made me pass them through, because we go into West End blues. And this was... I couldn't see West End blues following Read 'em John.
No, it wouldn't. That would have been an odd follow-up track, I think, to Read 'em John.
Because this is, once again... Great levels with the vocals. This time coupled with the banjo. The way it was coupled in Eden with the cello. This was, once again, they know how to work with their voice.
Mm-hmm.
Great job doing that.
Now, this was a lot of banjo-fiddle interplay going on right here, which I think was some of the best on the album.
Yeah.
Just to show their comping skills and whatnot, if you could call them comping skills, because in many cases that's all they do. But it's impressive. It's a feat.
One of the cool things about this track is that you had two fiddles going at the same time. It wasn't just one fiddle doing double stops, but you could actually hear the fiddles were doubling up, and they give you a very nice kind of funky and dirty sound. Very, very much like a classic old-timey feeling, which I love. I love that kind of fiddling.
And it just had a great layering.
And the banjo is actually a bit unusual. A lot of the banjo playing on, the banjo on Ruby is very much your traditional Southern clawhammer style banjo, the kind of thing that was prevalent in the South prior to bluegrass, which used a whole different kind of banjo playing. This is not quite straight out clawhammer. It's still got some rhythmic stuff going on, but the syncopation's a little different. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing just has a bit more of a syncopated kind of jazzy beat to it, which is nice.
Yeah, it was really kind of
it's a good vocal showcase as well.
Yeah, the strong vocals that kind of really also drew you in.
Right, kind of not specifically blues, but bluesy.
Yeah, it had a blues-esque kind of sound, but still very much in the vein of the singing you kind of expect this point at the record. The vocalists have kind of at this point proven themselves as far as what they're capable of, and this is just kind of more of the same.
The only thing is, I
done
can't call it a weighted track necessarily. I still feel like this, in terms of tone, you could almost bypass it. As far as a crucial point in the record necessarily, it's just another showcase of their skill.
Yeah, but also on a record like this, you're not really.
That's the point I was trying to make before, though, which is why Leaving Eden is so spectacular in its own right.
Yeah.
West End Blues did have, if I'm not mistaken, theme work of it was a little bit of a darker, a little bit of a downer.
I mean, but
it wasn't an uplifting song like pretty much everything else.
No, I'm not in an uplifting
song.
That's
what I was saying.
Just not in a statement of meaning. Perhaps I didn't feel the oomph factor that makes any sense.
But what I'm trying to say is, I think this album's arc is in the fact that there really isn't an arc, and that's what
I was saying before.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of agreeing. Is that its lack of arc is what kind of pulls it together. Right. Actually,
that's why I can't draw this magnet to this track in the same way. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Well, speaking of no arc, Poor Black Sheep. All right.
This is.
One word really describes this for me.
What?
Furious. This has some really heavy, quick fingers playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's amazingly fast at times, and this is really some of my best fiddle work, some of the best banjo work on the album.
And this is the track where you had thought it was a stand-up bass and it was actually a jug, because that jug backbeat was what really drew me into this one. Because I like a strong backbeat that is a bass line.
It sounds
and the jug work in this was great.
Almost exactly like if you were to pluck a bass string and then slide immediately after. It has that same exact effect. That large reverberation.
And it really, really was like the backbone of the song.
It was
really
a heartbeat. It was quite literally a heartbeat at times.
And this is we're back to a kind of old style one chord vamp for this one.
Yeah,
where it's basically just on the one chord. But they're doing the fiddle and banjo parts of it. The fiddler is doing kind of more drawn out notes, and the banjo's kind of doing more of a strummy rhythm to that.
Yeah.
And then it'll break down into a taka 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 taka, where the fiddle and banjo start doing these the banjo's doing a clawhammer style picking pattern, and the fiddle is sawing at the eighth notes, and that creates it's not so much dynamics, but in terms of that rhythm variance from a slower thing happening to choppier bits.
Well, that's
that
what you
keeps
were
it interesting.
Discussing before the podcast. An Irish manner of set planning, so to speak, to change up your rhythms on a dime like that. It is good showmanship, and I think that is probably where the end of this album draws its power.
Yeah,
is because of the variations even within the tracks.
And this is this actually this one harkens back to the very first track, because it's also got what would have normally been a pretty traditional four to the floor real beat going on, but the jug is actually doing kind of an interesting polyrhythm the way the snare drum was doing on the first track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it's definitely very apparent.
And that kind of adds a nice color to it that you don't. it makes you sit up and listen and pay attention. Because like, oh, wait a minute, it's doing something slightly different rhythmically. Possibly modern, possibly something just traditional but more obscure. But it makes you take notice.
Yeah,
that goes even further in track 12.
Yeah, so hands down the longest track title we've had in a while. I truly understand that you love another man is track 12 on the record.
This one,
This was playing
percussion.
with meter, just as he was describing it, not just doing something a little bit different. This was going from 4/4 to 3/4 to 4/4 to other rhythms, like on a dime. It was really keeping you on your toes. I think probably more so than any other track.
and it was the punctuation of the percussion, to get all alliteration on us, that really made this a very pointed song. Very well done.
Well,
this had the disharmony between the male and female vocalists too, which did a beautiful job of setting up emotions.
Yeah.
On the other hand, though, I still felt the ditty quality. Not that there was any shortage of ditties here, but it's amazing how they actually managed to fuse such rhythmic complexity.
Would you say that this album is ditty-tastic?
No, I would not say that.
No one
that
would say that except for you, and that's bad.
You have said it.
I have. It's been said. It can't be taken
It's
back.
actually good that no one else would say it.
Yes.
That's actually good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably for the
Because
better.
all we have to do is toss them in a dumpster somewhere, and the
And
world would
it's
be
done.
rid of saying stuff like that.
Okay,
The door
so
you
you're
open,
gonna
man. See the door.
you're gonna bleep that on air if you could.
It'll just be beep-tastic.
I'm not gonna leave him guessing. You dug your hole.
Yeah, well, whatever.
So we
but
we got the fife on this track again.
Yeah,
this is where it came back in.
It came back in, and it actually was used sparingly enough to not wear, but yet it created
It was an
something of a
accent
backbone.
on the song, yeah.
Exactly, it did a good backbone of working with the vocals. That's the one thing they seem that the whole album seems to do very well, is they know how to complement their vocals and to use instruments to expand them, which sometimes the instrument's another person singing, sometimes it's a cello, banjo. The fife did that in this, and it did a great job.
That was done as early as Ruby.
Yeah.
And what's
With the
interesting
swells.
is that this is like, I haven't actually looked, but it's probably as long as Boodly Bum Bum.
Yeah.
But not as. It didn't get old.
It didn't.
Partially because because the beat is so slippery.
Yeah, they were
because
both
it's
tracks at
disjointed.
around 4 minutes,
And
but
you're
this one definitely felt more cohesive and engaging.
This one kept you on your toes. It's like you're saying that
Yep.
with the beat doing all this weird stuff and the meter shifting around on you.
Yeah.
I kind of wish this one was a little bit longer, to be honest. I wanted maybe a little more showcasing with the instruments.
Well, 'cause it was
They
evolving
could
as
have
it went.
shifted up that rhythm like any number of times. In
Yeah.
fact, the only time they really kind of solidified it at 4/4 was the choruses. But it's counterintuitive. The fact that you have that ditty element, it seems so lighthearted combined with these rhythmic complexities.
And the chorus was very memorable and very catchy.
It was.
Which a lot of these tracks that were more upbeat sounding
Yeah.
had very catchy choruses that were very engaging and very much pulled you in.
What's interesting is also it's like you get this weird rhythm, and that kind of thing happened a lot, but it's in a way that's very controlled as well, because it's definitely a structure. It's an odd structure.
Yeah.
It's like a
very-
controlled chaos.
It's
almost.
it's asymmetric, but it's not chaotic. Like when you
Yeah.
hear some old blues, if you hear Muddy Waters playing,
Oh, yeah, sure.
or
Absolutely.
some of the other guys from back like Mississippi, John Hurt, they do a lot of stuff where they just sort of hang a few extra beats on the end of
Right.
the phrase, and it really would be arbitrary.
It would
Right?
almost
not,
seem that
not
way,
be
though.
a pattern.
You'd have to think about it for a minute. Though, like the first and second listen, it almost does seem impromptu.
Yeah,
of course,
but
it can't
when you-
possibly be impromptu. Otherwise, they would lose their
Not
form.
with that many instruments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're definitely, it's definitely all intentional here,
Yep.
and it's like very carefully orchestrated. It's something that later on Captain Beefheart was really good at. He'd do some crazy stuff where it really sounded chaotic, but then they do the whole thing again in the next phrase. It's like, oh wait a minute, they're just like repeating this crazy complex thing.
I haven't heard that in a
How
while.
did they do
Captain
that?
Beefheart.
Moving on to track 13, we have No Man's Mama.
All right.
I liked this track.
This was.
I
this,
really love this track.
This wasn't a love. This was just pure awesome.
Yeah.
First,
It starts off in this like 1920s beautiful just songstress kind of style.
This was
nice and slow.
This
Yeah.
really, really rang of Trementia, the only opera that Scott Joplin ever wrote. Scott Joplin's one of the most famous ragtime players ever to walk the earth, and he did actually manage to gain enough acclaim to actually do an opera. And of course, when he did that, he had to side with what was popular in more standard 20s white culture, and that tended to go with 1920s standards. I heard that here, but yet not without its element of ragtime or soul. All that stuff was here,
and
it was a perfect blend.
It ended with the lines, and I love these, because the whole song is actually about a divorce, the culmination of a divorce. This ends the 5-year war. I am myself once more. I love that.
It's just,
And
I mean,
it
the song
goes
is all
right
about this.
into-
It's from the
Yeah.
perspective of the woman being nobody's mama.
And
she doesn't want to be
yeah.
anyone's mother.
It ends the 5-year war and goes straight into that high energy.
I'm free.
I'm coming out and all that,
Admit
and
it.
it's just so uplifting and upbeat.
And the turn that the track
You
takes
can't-
is really great.
you can't help but smile.
It's one of these really long intro tracks.
Yeah.
that
Enough
reminds-
to make you think that's going to be...
The song, yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that Cole Porter was great at, and you'd
Yep.
hear Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra would do that kind of thing.
And all of these artists are the perfect blend
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
early
absolutely.
20th
It
century soul
definitely
music.
had that ragtime feel, and it also reminded me of Memphis Minnie, who did a lot of stuff that was also kind of in this style and tended to be kind of very, very progressively feminist for its time.
And
This wasn't that though. This was
Not quite, but
it was very approachable in
Yeah.
its feminist elements. It wasn't scary feminist which can come
no,
off
it
sometimes.
was very humorous,
It was-
which is
I love
typical of Memphis Minnie and other people doing this kind of rag music.
yeah.
I've got twin beds and I take pleasure in announcing one's for sale. I love that. It's always tongue in cheek. It's I don't need a man anymore, but not like I'm angry at them. But you know what?
it's
I'm
really-
moving on with my life. I'm a new person. You got that reinvention of herself in the B section, the reinvention of the music.
It's
and
witty
just-
and carefree.
yeah. It's got
Which
got
makes
hope.
it- which
it's
makes
got
it
love.
There
it's got
was
life.
a witty, carefree nature to 1920s feminism. That's got kind of turned on its head in 1960s feminism, but it's nice to see.
Yeah,
It's nice to be
there's no
reminded of.
anger. That's what's great about it.
Yeah,
There's no
is,
anger in
Yeah,
this.
this song is all just about her and moving forward and owning it herself.
Thank God that's over.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a celebration almost.
It's not even almost. It's totally a celebration.
Yeah. Moving into our second to last track, track 14, Briggs Corn Shucking Jig / Camptown Hornpipe. It's a 2-part song, hence the 2 titles. And this is an all-instrumental track, if I remember correctly.
Well,
Yes,
instrumental.
and it starts off with a very with a banjo sound that's very reminiscent of a really, really early style of banjo playing that was played primarily by black musicians on gut string gourd banjos. Some of the very earliest banjos that showed up in America.
Literally the kinds of things you'd be sitting around a campfire when campfires were your only recourse as a pioneer. Because this was very 18th century to me. This is not even 19th century. You see certain styles start to merge here and there. Population centers start to grow. There was a rustic nature to this in a very extreme degree.
I think if I remember correctly, banjos didn't really start coming over from Africa until the 1830s.
Oh, really?
So it would have been 19th century, but early 19th century.
Pre-civ.
I say it
Yeah.
loosely, considering we don't
Pre-civ.
have
Pre-bell. Antebellum, postbellum? Antebellum.
antebellum. Well, yeah.
But it's not actually being played on a gourd banjo. You can tell it's a steel string banjo, and that gives it a slightly more modern resonance and some sort of chord work with some major sevenths in there, which
That's
adds,
true. Those
add a
moments
distinctive
bring
flavor to it, and
bring the
then,
modern
it's sort
element.
of you get some some tambourine bells or something, and the bones are clacking away in the background too. And then it shifts into the hornpipe from sort of a jig into a hornpipe, a different kind of dancing rhythm. It goes into your traditional Southern clawhammer style banjo.
Yeah.
I did enjoy part B, the hornpipe, a lot more, and it's kind of hard for me to put my finger on it. I don't really know what it is.
It had more boogie.
I
It had
kinda
more
do.
drop.
It definitely had a little more umph to it.
I actually
if
enjoyed
you
the
would.
first part more.
Well,
I
you
liked the
would.
simplicity of it.
You like complexity and
Simplicity.
contrary.
Actually, the first part was a lot more
Simplicity,
simplistic.
in this
The,
case.
the, the
No,
first
I mean
part,
in-
the first part
in
was a little
group
more
dynamics.
unusual musically. It was more.
It was very lackadaisical. I mean,
Yeah.
You've never got to use that word on the podcast, I don't think. I know that's one of your words.
is it?
Do
The-
they
the
say
second
shit?
part-
Yeah, no.
Lackadaisical? Really?
Yes.
I always
No,
tend to
you're
say,
right.
I always put in an X accidentally, like I'm going for laxative or something, but...
Yeah.
A lackadaisical is very different
Going
than
for laxative, I don't wanna mix
lazy.
them.
Yeah.
Anyway, the horn
It's a different
type,
kind.
yeah, definitely more upbeat. Definitely,
Yeah.
energy. There was a lot more energy to it.
It's funny, when I was listening to this record the first time, hearing this song, I was like, oh, great, a strong instrumental track, this is a great conclusion. And then I started to hear the next track, which we're going to get into, Pretty Bird. And when that started, my initial reaction was, oh, man, that would have been a great end, this is going to stink. But boy, was I wrong, because
Oh, boy.
this track is a perfect end to the record. It's called Pretty Bird, it's an all vocal track, just the lead singer, what was her name again? You mentioned?
Rhiannon Giddens.
Singing by herself, nobody else, and it was just beautiful. You go through such a range of emotions just through the way she sings the song without anything else backing her up. It's absolutely gorgeous and completely engaging on a very minimalistic level. And she does so much even with just her voice, so it's not even that minimalistic.
So Matt, tell us how you really feel. I will agree mostly. It was a great showcase of her vocal work, but it was there was something missing for me because, to be honest,
Here we go.
this obviously has to be the last song. Just the way it's designed, it has to be the last song. It's obvious she's an incredible singer.
Too predictable for you?
No, but I think it's the lack of like a melody. It just doesn't do it.
It's
for
all
me.
nothing but melody.
Yeah,
no,
that's
that's
all the
what I'm
song
looking
is
for.
melody.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Harmony?
Thank you. Lack of harmony. The lack of strike that, reverse it. It's the lack of any beat that just
I disagree.
after that
is-
after
look,
all this
That's
work
a
with
taste thing.
Yeah.
There's,
I think
it's
that
true.
it's-
These days, you really don't get too much solo singing. You often don't get too much solo music of anything, except for maybe guitar.
But
which
here's
we might
the
end up
thing.
talking about a little bit later.
we're
But
going into everything.
piano.
The other 14 tracks of this album, very heavily beat driven, very heavily oriented towards timing. This had no beat, no timing to
That is
it.
precisely what made it the most beautiful juxtaposition.
Yes, exactly. A great conclusion to a record like this is taking it all away. It's the same reason we really liked certain bands where they completely turn things on their head, making a good wrap up to
This is kind
a
of like
record.
it's always a big dilemma, either in an album or when you're playing a show and planning a set. How you're going to finish off? Are you going to finish with a big bang, a big huge finale finish number, or are you going to just do something super stark? And
The
then
cool
on?
off.
Sometimes I play with the Wasties as well. Been on the show
Right, of
previously,
course.
and sometimes we'll finish with something like The Parting Glass,
Yeah.
which we just have Molly singing it
Yeah.
a cappella in free meter. And sometimes that's the best way to finish a night, just something slow and beautiful and haunting. And sometimes that's what really seals the deal. Sometimes you want to do it the other way. You want to do it with,
Right. Well, you've also
big rollicking
you guys have also done
crescendo.
your close where you do
We'll
the
do
Doctor
stuff.
Who theme into Salty Dog, and
Yeah.
that's a high energy close. But I mean, yeah,
And,
well,
either way can work. I think they totally nailed it with them.
Yeah,
I think
me
this
too.
is in the finest tradition of both sort of the plain song of folk music, where you'd have people gathering after dinner, and like the last song of the evening, somebody would just sing because maybe that's like that super basicness of like this is what it all boils down to in the end. The human being making music in the most simple way we have, which is to sing. No instruments, no nothing, just like a woman and her voice.
Yeah.
And it's the best tradition
I think-
of like gospel or soul and all that stuff. Just like the voice doing its one thing, and I love it.
Me
I love
too.
this track. I
And-
think it finishes the album off fantastically and very strongly.
We always talk about album arc and how sometimes track 1 should be cyclical with the final track and how they should wrap together. But I like how this is a solid start and a solid finish. It's not cyclical. It's a complete album in the fact that you start one way, you end another way, and that's it. That's the end.
The fact of the matter is, as much as I really do like the Briggs corn shucking jig, it was
/ Camptown hornpipe.
Thank you. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to the end of that track, I would have had very much oh, it's done now? Huh.
Yeah.
Huh, that's surprising. Because there's not enough
it does
variation
kind of
there.
just end, yeah.
I mean, I do enjoy the simplicity of that track, which does, again, in more of a subtle sense, vary with the previous tracks, being really simple, really, really lazy around the campfire as such. But that's not enough. It's not enough of a punch. You know, we're not looking for subtlety when you're closing off a record. Sometimes you are, but there's nothing ironic about this record. Why would you be going for subtlety?
Yeah, that's true. Let's start heading into our wrap-up. I guess I'll get started.
Yes.
This track was an interesting listen for me because, I mean, I like my fair share of folk and traditional. I like blues, and I'm starting to listen to a lot more of it, too. But I didn't honestly know what to make of it the first time I heard it. I liked parts, I didn't like other parts, but on the second listen, I kind of really got a perspective of the track, and I stopped looking for a linking factor other than their musicianship, because they jump around a lot on the record. There's no solid arc, except in, like we were talking about, the fact that there is no arc is the solid arc. That they are kind of all over the place, and they're kind of trying to do their own thing.
Let me just interject to say that I do believe there's a showmanship arc.
Okay.
That's part of what we were just
fair.
discussing with the way they chose to conclude it.
Yeah, that's true. And it really does kind of wrap up the album quite nicely. As far as tastes, there's some stuff that I really liked, some other stuff that I didn't. But there was nothing that was bad. Even if I didn't personally like it, there's clearly talent in just about all of these tracks, even if some were more simplistic than others. But there's clearly a talent from beginning to end in this record. I mean, you can't really deny that, especially with the vocals, the banjo. I mean, all of the instrumentation is again, sometimes a little rough around the edges, but I feel like even that stuff is very calculated in some of how rough it is. It's controlled chaos, almost, as we were saying before. That being said, I think from John's perspective, I may agree a little that some of the lyrics here were a little light. That's not necessarily bad, but I also didn't really identify with all of the lyrics on the record. There were some moments where I did and some moments where I didn't.
I'll say that you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
The lyrics, especially in the more high-tempo stuff, is just to get you to move along with it. If you're not dancing, you're singing along, because we're going to have easy choruses to pick up on our first listen, stuff you can easily sing to.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And
they want to capture
Not
you.
in every case, but in many cases here, the relevancy of the lyrics gets lost.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit lost in the modern day. Some stuff is eternal. Some stuff you could probably sing about the end of time, but there is a good deal here, which is a little bit dated.
Yeah, it falls a little short. I mean, also, obviously, if you're someone who specifically likes this band or their style of music, this record's going to be right up your alley. You might dislike a few tracks, but even those tracks aren't bad per se. It just may not fit what you're looking for in the record. All in all, I think that they set out to clearly achieve what they were going for. I think some tracks fell short, and I really would have pushed it to that max level was some of the lighter tracks like Read 'em John and a couple others that we mentioned that just kind of fell a little short. If they did a little something else with it, it would really push it to that next level. That being said, it's definitely clear above average. It's clear. It's definitely above the threes. I think for me it's a solid 4. It's just a nice solid 4 for me. You know, what might have pushed it to the next level from 4 to 4.5 or 5 is, again, if there was we talked a lot that there were some tracks that were just missing something. It wasn't always identifiable what the something was, but it was missing something. So for me, it's a 4. I like it, and I definitely give it another listen. I definitely enjoyed it.
On my side, I'm really intrigued with the variances we're getting in this album. You got to take this one without the theme work, without an arc or something like that, because there's just so many different elements being introduced in here. Not just instrumentally, but just in style. There's blues, there's bluegrass, there's a little bit of jazz, there's a little bit of pop, there's beatboxing. You got a lot of different elements coming together in a folk kind of tradition. Very intriguing. Obvious craftsmanship in the instruments. They know what they're doing. Obvious quality in the vocals. There was just some lacking elements here and there. Read 'em John is the perfect example, but even Run Mountain had a very tired kind of a feel to it. Little Dee Bum Bum, very classic. It wasn't something new. There was a couple of things there where I can go and say I've heard that 1,000 times because it's been used in movies and it's been used in television and it's been used in music just so often. And while there was a lot of restatements of, especially with the fiddle and banjo work, that was just very inventive, some of it felt very tired. And that detracts as a whole for me. It was really, really good, though. That's the whole thing. It was really good. 3.5. It is above the rest, but I really can't say it's a 4-level kind of a thing. The fusions are great, but because it wasn't just 1 or 2 fusions of really trying to purvey folk, because it was more experimentation, I just can't push it up to those 4s yet.
Let's look at what this album is. You could take it 1 or 2 ways in terms of arc, as I said before. On one hand, I could easily see this as the set for any given night, say a town gathering or something. It strikes me as either you're going for something retro, say a town is putting on some sort of retro event, or something that could easily pop out of the turn of the century. Or, on the other hand, you could also consider this an eclectic showcase of styles for all the experiences of Americana, the history, as it were, as we lead toward urbanization and everything, and for the holdouts as well. It's a love of the countryside. It's a love of the types of experiences you have in the countryside, such as camping. These just like minor things, but there's also really strong romantic statements here. The kind of things you just couldn't say in a more modern sense. So I appreciate the kind of thing that could. It seems as if it's on its way out, and I like to see it reflected by certain people as tradition. It almost is a museum piece in a way. And I know we talked about how, with these bands, it's more customary to infuse a little bit of the new into the old, and that's how you really kind of keep things relevant. But I kind of like the museum piece. I mean, to be honest, when I look back on it, the tracks that really took that the furthest were Ruby, for the reason of the beatboxing, and Country Girl, and Leaving Eden for the reasons of her style of singing. They, as much as I do like these tracks, can sometimes seem out of place. Because when you have 15 tracks, subtract 3, then you have 12 tracks of museum pieces, which really don't play around with historical fusions at all, in many ways. They are perfect products of the time period. Then, it really diminishes the impact of those others. It seems like that would be fit for another project. Not necessarily another band, but another project. So just to go back to what Jean was saying, yes, there are holes. There are holes where it could seem boring, but only in a modern sense. It's a niche-y thing. It's very much a niche-y thing. You need to be in the mood, in my opinion, to go for this, which is why it's going to get knocked down a little bit. It lacks a universality. If you didn't have that experience, you're very much so not predisposed unless you have an affinity for it. So, I'm going to have to agree with John. I think this is a solid 3.5. I can't bring it to 4 for the universal reasons, but they are damn good musicians in almost every regard. So, I think 3.5 is fair for that.
I think it may be if they truly focused on the style of music they're playing, they would be a forefront artist of that style.
I already think they're a forefront artist of that style. And it's not to say that I don't think that, a 4+ album could be achieved with this style, but it seems like it would have to be a little bit more clever in the mixing
Well, here's
of the old and the new.
I was actually going to address that. some of this stuff. I have sort of two perspectives on coming at this album from. One of them is I've been listening to this band for a while, and I've been listening to their early stuff, and this is sort of the second album they've done where they've been trying to infuse more modern things into their work. Most of their earlier work has been very much just the museum pieces, just straight working within, we're keeping alive the North Carolina African American fiddle music tradition. Doing the old songs, not writing new stuff, doing the old instruments, and showcasing a sort of a lesser known side of that kind of folk music, but still making it a museum piece. And they've been sort of doing a balancing act. And sort of the other perspective is like what I try to do as well as a musician, the kind of because I love a lot of roots and Americana stuff, and especially the actual early folk that went into it, the early Delta blues, North Mississippi Hill Country blues, ragtime, early jazz, Dixieland, Appalachian folk music, early country, cowboy
I grew up
songs.
on ragtime as a piano player.
Yeah, so I mean, and when I do, some of the stuff I do, I like to cover old traditional tunes and then sort of reinterpret them or sort of channel them through the kind of punk rock that I cut my teeth on when I was first starting to get into music. And there's a very interesting balancing act that an artist has to do between acting as a museum curator and making things new. And I think that they are definitely getting the hang of it. I think that, personally, I think tracks like Country Girl sort of fall on their face. Some of the tracks are not, they're misses, they miss their mark. They're on the right path. And I think I definitely also say this is like a 3.5 album. I think partially because as much as I like the good songs, none of them are like totally mind-blowing to me. And it's not an album that made me as excited as other things have. I think it might grow on me. I think the more I listen to it, the more I'm liking some of the stuff. And sometimes, albums just don't knock you over the head the first time. You just have to spend more time with them.
I think
I like
Oh, continue. Sorry.
in terms of their musicmanship, I like that these guys are really solid and not actually all that flashy. We talk about places where they're showcasing their musicmanship, but what they're really showcasing a lot of this stuff is tastefulness. And I love tasteful music. There are, people talk about, when they talk about folk music, they'll talk about Nickel Creek and Chris Thiele, who's their mandolin player, who plays blazingly fast, but I don't think the guy has a lot of style. He's very technically good, but I'd rather hear somebody who can play half the notes but with more soul. And there are a lot of people who you hear are just like they have something to prove, and they're being super flashy and super like, look how good I am, look how much I can do. These guys sound like they're much more confident. Like they don't have to prove anything to anybody. They're just doing it for themselves. And you hear that they're good in a way that's like they have
a vision in mind, it seems.
Yeah, they have a vision and they have taste, and I think that's a very important thing when somebody is like good and technically proficient without being flashy, because like we were saying, a lot of these tunes are very simple. A lot of the lyrics are poppy and easy to catch along with, and there was always a very interesting sort of dichotomy happening in early folk music between it being, these sort of fiddlers are showing what they can do, and the best fiddler gets to play the dances and make a living and get the girls, but this also still being a very democratic music, a people's music, something that anybody can pick up and learn, that is not prohibitive the way super complex jazz or progressive rock or, fancy symphonic metal might be in our day and age. Stuff that anybody can pick up, which is, one of the reasons I find a lot of commonality between early folk music and punk rock, is because it's this democratic thing.
It's funny you say that.
It's a lot of it is about being very visceral and beat driven, and something you can easily connect to and easily pick up and do, and be an organic sort of more about community and less about hierarchy, less about having, worshiping an idol on an instrument, and more being like learning at the feet of the master and then going out and doing it yourself and taking the ball and running with the tradition, making it do what you want, and not feeling like you're doing something sinful by not being a purist.
Yeah,
everybody gets an equal say in how this music is going to evolve, how it's going to change.
And I just want to say, like, after talking about it, I'm kind of starting to... I think I'm looking at this album with rose-colored glasses, because the points that... Especially, I mean, John was sort of similar to me, but kind of expanding a bit, but the points that you two made kind of made me realize that a lot of the things that gave this album a high rating for me are very specific, and it's not... There's a lot more album besides those specific moments.
I don't know. I don't think you're allowed to change your rating.
That's not true, because
we never do that.
Actually, we've done it many a time.
So we're going... You
sarcasm. Sarcasm.
No, I think I'm going to drop it down. I still think I give them a little more credit than that. I'm going to drop it to a 3.75. I think that there's...
Still got to be different.
Well, it's not even that. It's more the fact that I'm still seeing things, I think, on a level with this album that I'm... It's a little more...
I'll speak to what Painless said. This is something that I definitely see growing.
Yeah.
This is end of year. Yeah. I'm going to change it to like a 4 kind of an album, possibly, with repetitions. Just being able to pick out some more banjo work or fife work. I don't know.
On the flip side of that, when I hear this album, I also hear all the things they didn't do.
Yeah.
I hear the potential for some of the things that like some of the stuff, like the very first track, I thought like they had the beatboxing and the polyrhythm going on. I felt like, yes, this definitely sounds different. They're adding those elements, and this is gelling nicely. And some of the other songs as well, some of them not so much. I think that the next album they do is going to be even better, and they're like having followed the arc of their early work through this. I see that they definitely have more room to grow, and they haven't quite nailed what they're trying to do.
And I think that's my thing. I'm convinced this style of music isn't limited to ditties. Like I've heard more fulfilled ideas in that regard. I know it's possible. I just do happen to think that based on this record, that was the point, to show a more eclectic style.
And that's why I want to bring my rating down a step back, because I agree with that. I think there's more potential, and giving this a 4...
That's a quarter step, dude.
Yeah, well, a quarter step back at least. I think that it's because you're right. There is this potential that they haven't quite explored, so I'm going to knock it down a half a step. However, overall on a rating... For the simple, ignore it, listen to it, buy it, definitely listen to it. It's definitely worth hearing. This is a record that's fun. You can dance to it. It's definitely worth giving a listen. With that wrap-up of the album, we're going to have Painless play another song for us, and then we'll talk a little more.
I call home. You may think that luck has forsaken me. I reckon you'd not be alone. But these clothes are just fine for working, and the shack is a palace to me. For when I step inside, I greet with pride a loving family. Well, there's poverty of pocket, of spirit and of mind. The only wealth that I care for is friendship so true and kind. This world has many a mystery. Oh, one thing I know for sure, I'll never want for the needs of the heart. Rich man, I ain't so poor. I never traveled in first class on a big ship across the wide sea. Never rode on the rails in a Pullman. The freight car's just fine by me. Just give me my hat and my satchel and a good walking stick in my hand. There are wonders to see when you're wandering free, just a rambling across this great land. Oh, there's poverty of pocket, of spirit and of mind. The only wealth that I care for is friendship so true and kind.
Thanks, Painless. That was great. Now, I want to get into a little bit about...
Too kind.
I want to get in a little bit more about you, because the more that I look at where this is going, getting into our big instrument conversation is just not going to be feasible, because there's so much to talk about. I'd rather at least talk about you first.
I got two big questions.
Okay.
And these are probably going to be... These are going to be my focus. One, you said you were a punker that went folk.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to kind of know how that works. But two, and this is something... How did you choose your instrument, or did it choose you, or why do you play the music you play? What specifically instrumentally?
Okay, well, we'll start at the beginning.
This is where one starts.
Yes.
Not
Actually,
necessarily.
we're starting in the middle now.
There could be flashbacks.
Oh, these many years ago, when I was just a wee whippersnapper. Well, when I was a wee whippersnapper, around 12 or so, is when I first started really kind of... I feel like my musical awareness started happening. You know, you get to, 7th grade or so, and you start,
You start picking out your own albums as opposed
Exactly.
to what's on the radio or
what's
Mom
on the
and
radio.
Dad.
Exactly. And when in my case, it was, I think, 1993. Green Day just came out with Dookie. Offspring came out with
That was a big
Smash.
one for me, too, yeah.
And
Oh, man.
that was all she wrote. It was punk rock.
Yeah.
And being the inquisitive lad that I was, I later on started digging. Like, okay, this is punk rock. I like this punk rock. What else is there? Oh, this went back to the 70s. There are these guys called the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, and all these other California bands who didn't make it to where I grew up in Israel. So I only kind of got like what made it onto MTV and made it international, which was Green Day and the Offspring, and there's some other stuff around them, but like Rancid didn't really cross the pond. So I sort of found out about them and NoFX later, mostly because I'd see these little bits of old show flyers that the Offspring would put in their albums, and I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, who are all these other bands they keep mentioning? So punk rock was kind of my own personal musical love. And I sort of had a bit of a, awareness of folk music going on. My mom was a big Joni Mitchell fan, and
Oh, there you go.
my parents, got me onto Dylan and stuff like that. So, and I never like really rejected all that much of their music. Well, some of it, yes. I mean, there were some Hall & Oates tapes that I loved when I was 6. And nowadays I'm just like, oh god.
Hall & Oates had a special... I mean, I can still go back to it, just kind of laugh at it, because I mean, a lot of that stuff was very silly, and you gotta...
it's just like, there's some stuff that I thought was so cool.
Of course.
Like, just before my, musical blossoming, when I was still, convincing myself that whatever was on the radio was cool, I was, really into the Pet Shop Boys.
Oh, man.
Wow.
I thought that album I thought it was, that was,
High art?
that was the poop right there.
Yeah, that was the poop.
That was the shizzle, and nowadays not so much. I mean, that one I can still listen to somewhat nostalgically.
And not laugh?
Not laugh.
Yeah.
But I'm not really that into it anymore.
Hey, 80s pop had its place.
It did.
It gave us... What did it give us?
A lot.
Bad haircuts,
Stuff.
cool music videos.
Something to laugh at.
80s
Well, no,
pop
it
was
was
the
a
music
fodder
video
for pop-up
generation.
video.
Yeah, well...
It gave us amazing music videos.
Yeah, because that was the age where music videos really became a thing, was during 80s pop. But, so, have you been playing mandolin your whole life?
No,
or?
not at all. I started playing guitar, actually. Well,
Okay.
no, I started playing piano. I was in 6th grade, and I had a friend who played drums, and I thought, that was so cool. I want to play drums. And my mom's like, you want to play drums first, you get good at a real instrument. You can play piano.
Biased.
If you get good at piano, then we'll see about drums. Which probably her tactic was, he'll forget about drums by then.
Yeah, right.
And it worked. so I took piano lessons for about 6 years. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was nice, and actually gave me really good grounding and sort of understanding musical structure. I don't have perfect pitch or anything remotely like absolute hearing in terms of pitch and stuff, but I have very good relative hearing. I'm good at looking at a tune and saying, okay, here's the fundamental note. This is going to the 4th and the 5th, and that one's major, that one's minor. That's a 6 and a 2. I can understand structure, and I'm good for at picking out tunes that I hear.
So you can
I can relate with that.
You
do
can actually
have,
speak to Steve.
Yeah,
Not
just
quite at
speak
his level,
similar
but a
language.
little
Well,
bit.
Yeah.
But so I started out.
But I was going to ask, the classical or jazz lessons?
Bit of both.
Oh,
my teacher
that's
was very
interesting.
flexible about things, and so we learned some classical stuff, and I enjoyed it, and I love Mozart and Bach, but he let me do some boogie woogie. I love the sort of Dorsey stuff, and in the mood stuff like that.
I'm thinking
Boogie
about the very
jazz.
basic boogie woogie stuff that I was introduced to. I'd still say that there were classical lessons that I really didn't get my jazz experience until college. But it's funny that you got a mix. But every teacher's different.
Yeah. Anyway, so about around high school, I was like, dude, guitar's where it's at. Chicks dig the guitar, right? And
That's
so I begged my
50%
mom
of
to teach
guitars.
me guitar because she had a guitar, and she kept saying, yeah, I'll do it, and she never got around to it. So I taught myself, and slowly got better. I actually played in a punk band after my army service. I met a friend who played bass, and we found out we both liked the same music, so we were writing songs, some in English, some in Hebrew, and we actually had a band for a while, and that was a lot of fun.
What was the name of the band?
The band was called Fishy Boom.
Fishy Boom. Interesting.
I'll play that for you sometime. I still
Cool.
haven't
Oh, you
recorded
have some recorded stuff?
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
I'll
we-
have
we
to
did-
hear that,
we-
yeah.
We recorded an album.
Oh, that's great. I'll have
It
to
was,
definitely check that out.
It was something.
And so,
I'm still pretty proud of it. We were pretty good.
so you learned the guitar and then moved on to
Guitar.
mandolin from there.
I got to college.
Yeah.
Started listening to a bit of bluegrass. The Old Brother Where Art Thou
Oh, yeah,
soundtrack.
sure. Cool.
Hit
Oh,
me.
yeah, I love
People
that
were very
soundtrack.
aware of stuff, and
Yeah.
I heard that Man in Constant Sorrow song. I was like,
Oh, it's
wow,
such a great song.
This is really good. I'm
Yeah.
taking, and it was like very different
Yeah.
from the kind of musical paradigms I was used to in terms of the structures and the instruments and the vocals, and like I recognize this because we'd all heard that stuff before
Yeah,
at some
sure.
point, but you never really thought about it that much until then. It became a thing. It was
Yeah.
trending. And I had an art teacher in college who was also a musician. He played the mandolin. He's like, this newfangled bluegrass stuff. Listen to the old school. I was listening to Alison Krauss and Union Station, who were very much sort of like
Yeah.
modern bluegrass, kind of pushing the boundaries, but very, very, very slick.
Yeah.
And he was much more in the old-time folk tradition. He actually sold me a mandolin. He let me borrow one of his
Oh, cool.
mandolins to learn on.
Can we actually announce where you went to college? Because it might explain something.
I went to UC Santa Cruz in
Okay.
California.
California.
cool.
Gotcha.
At the north tip of the Monterey Bay. And my lithography teacher, Paul Rangel, is a fantastic musician and recently retired from teaching, but is still playing a lot.
Oh, cool.
He turned me on to a lot of old school music, and I would go to the record store and look for the most obscure old banjo players I could find, just so I could like come back to class and impress and be like, yeah, so I've been listening to some Roscoe Holcomb lately. He's like, you know Roscoe Holcomb? No way. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that actually ended up being a great way to learn new music, just finding
Sure,
stuff
of
that would
course.
impress
Buying
Paul.
obscure stuff you hadn't heard before and then
That's
listening
when
to
that's
it.
when I
Offers a
started
lifetime
playing.
love.
And I started playing mandolin, and I'd written some later on when I was in New York and started doing this Painless Parker thing. I was thinking about some of the older punk songs I've written and realizing that I could actually probably play them on the mandolin and make them as kind of folk songs.
Oh,
And
cool.
I definitely had that feeling of like there's this folk stuff, and a lot of it is topical and political, and it's raw and kind of ragged, and you hear all these old scratchy 78s from back in the day,
Sure.
and you start to hear the commonality. You start
You're
making
doing
that
a lot
connection.
of words are basically doing punk right there. And you start
Yeah.
saying political
And also
beat
just
up.
music that you don't have to be super produced to be good. You don't. It was
Well, that's punk.
It
Yeah.
was down home.
Some of it. I mean,
It was
you
down home. It was local.
Very
It was
simple.
organic. It was grassroots.
Yeah.
It was a little rowdy. People got a
Little.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Just a
I'm
little?
talking about the folk music.
Oh,
The
okay.
folk music is
I thought we were still on punk.
old. No, I'm. If you look at what in folk circles is called old time, which is mostly that Appalachian stuff I keep going on about, and even early cowboy stuff, Hank Williams. You think of it as kind of hokey and stuff, but he was a hellraiser. He was a whiskey drinker and a womanizer, and that guy knew how to, he was a wild child.
So when did you come to New York?
I came to New York in 2007 for
Okay.
grad school, actually, and I brought my mandolin with me. And
With a song in your heart and a gleam in your eye?
I wasn't thinking about mandolin that much then because I was too busy thinking about typography and fonts and
Oh, right.
studying design.
Because that's what you went to grad school for, right? Was design.
it was for design, and I worked subsequently at a type design studio. But I was kind of thinking about music again for a while. I should do something. So I came up with a stage name and started just recording stuff for fun. It was just covers that I was tweaking a little bit.
And how did the stage name come about?
Came courtesy of my old buddy Captain Beefheart.
Oh, yeah?
He's got this song called Orange Claw Hammer. Just a cappella, him singing something that sounds kind of stream of consciousness. When you listen to it in headphones or at a high enough volume, you can actually hear the tape clicks where they edited the whole thing together out of his crazy ramblings. And he name checks Painless Parker at some point, who was actually a dentist in the late 19th century. He went around with a traveling medicine show in the South with a brass band playing as he extracted teeth. He had this top hat and a necklace of teeth that he pulled out. He was a real character. He, the American Dental Association didn't like him because he was a bit of a huckster, and they tried to bar him from calling himself Painless Parker. They said there's no such thing as truly painless dentistry. It's false advertising. So what did Mr. Parker do? His real name was Edgar, I believe. Edgar R.R. Parker. He went and legally changed his first name to Painless. And said, screw you, ADA.
I'm going to do it.
And by the time he died, he had a business empire of dental clinics all over the West Coast.
That's great.
And his name shows up in this song by Captain Beefheart.
And
I listened to it, I'm like, that's a great band name. Has anybody used this yet? And so I went and Googled it, and
nobody did.
Nothing. And I'm like, damn, I gotta use this.
Great. Oh, that's cool.
And it served me well because it's got a bit of an old-timey feeling. I'm a big fan of alliteration.
Yeah. Oh, that's me too. Obviously, with the name of the site and a lot of the article titles.
Heck, yeah.
But a mutual friend of ours, Pete. When I was first creating the website, I couldn't think of what to name, and he's like, "Well, do alliteration. It's catchy, it pops, and it really pulls people in." So I've kind of tried to do that, and definitely Painless Parker has that feel, and it's great.
I think your second question was, how did I end up on the mandolin?
Yeah.
Which, and to be fair, when I do my shows, I usually do half a set on the mandolin and then half on guitar, just because some songs are better on guitar, and some songs I actually do on an electric guitar and rock out a bit more.
Yeah.
Although some of those have been going back to mandolin.
Yeah, I've noticed that you switch it up a little bit. Yeah.
I like to keep myself on my toes.
Well, I
would say the mandolin kind of chose me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a circumstance thing where my teacher was like, "Here, you should try learning some mandolin." I was like, "Okay, I'll give this a shot." I'm like, "Hey, this is interesting because the mandolin is tuned differently from a guitar. Guitars are tuned in fourths. The mandolin is tuned in intervals of fifths, and which is the same way a violin is tuned. And that kind of tuning really kind of opens up your mind to playing melody in a lot of ways, for one thing, and it also gives you these wonderful drone strings for another.
Right.
So you can do all this double stop stuff that you do on the fiddle, you can do on the mandolin, and get a lot of interesting tonal stuff that's harder to achieve on the guitar. And it just shifts your thinking. It rotates your brain 20 degrees.
Right.
And you're suddenly looking at things a little bit differently. Monet once said, I can move my easel 2 feet over and have a completely different painting, completely different landscape, just because of the change in the lighting and the angle.
Sure.
And that's sort of what mandolin did for my thinking musically. It's just, it lends itself to playing melodies in a way that the guitar doesn't.
That's some very wise advice, which I try to pass on to other aspiring musicians here and there, which is just that the way in which a certain instrument or a certain style of playing can open your doors, just imagination-wise. So if ever you feel like you're in a rut, do something drastically different.
And
pick up another instrument.
I've been trying to teach myself fiddle. And it's been a bit of an uphill battle.
Okay.
Going from fiddle to mandolin is very easy.
Going from mandolin to fiddle the other way
because you're going frets, and that's a
yeah.
pain. And the fiddles and mandolins are the same scale, the same tuning.
Right.
So I've had friends who were fiddlers who picked up the mandolin and said, "Oh, I know this."
Wow.
But going to a fretless instrument, to a bowed instrument, is very challenging.
Well, I look forward to hopefully seeing you play some more fiddle in the future. That would be cool.
Don't hold your breath. It's going to be a while.
Well,
I really suck right now.
Something I wanted to bring up is when I saw you play with Eli August at Sidewalk New York, you did a really great thing for the first time I had really seen. Alex Bell, a friend of the podcast, a member of the Wasties as well, sat in with his drum kit, his bass drum, and a washboard, and played with you at Sidewalk. And that was a lot of fun to watch. It was great. He was using quarters to play the washboard?
I think so. Or old keys.
Or old keys. And it was just... it added this dynamic to your songs that was really kind of neat. It was another thing, the songs sound great on their own with the mandolin and the guitar, but with him doing a little percussion, it really, did some really cool stuff.
I used to have a good friend named Sam, Sam Strick, very talented game designer, and he, I knew him at school. He was an undergrad while I was a grad, and he came to a show once. This was after we were both out of, I think he was out of school by then. I know I was. And I was doing a Painless Parker show. I said, hey, I play spoons and washboard. If you ever want to jam sometime, we should do that. So for a while, we were actually doing duo shows.
Oh, cool.
And we did a bunch of stuff, and there's some videos online of when we were playing together. Unfortunately, he moved to Seattle because there was more stuff going on professionally
there's a lot
for him.
Out there, yeah.
For game design.
It's most of it's out there.
He'd been working with a company in New York that went under.
Uh-huh.
And he was just like, yeah, I need to be in the Pacific Northwest. That's where it's at. So, sadly, he's on the other coast now. And I miss him because we had a lot of fun together.
Sure.
But Alex has been pretty excited about the washboard.
Yeah.
I think he can play spoons as well.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, that definitely added a nice touch, and it was still super portable.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's really nice about mandolins. They're small.
Yeah.
They can go everywhere.
Yeah.
And pianos.
And I also like the idea of, you've told me, and I think you said you're going to do this for your birthday, is do Painless Parker plugged in.
Oh yeah, we're
which is
turning it
instead
up
of
to
unplugged.
11.
Yeah, he's going to do a full
punk
band. Yeah, there should be a lot really cool.
All the songs I write, virtually all of them, even if they do sound like folk songs, they're all kind of like underneath the surface. They're still all punk rock.
And you can,
and then
you can
underneath
sense
everything
that, yeah.
I do, underneath all my old timey stuff, my steampunk leanings.
Yeah,
I'm still that punk rock 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's always been at the core of everything I do. The kind of the immediacy, the kind of urgency, that kind of sometimes aggression, but certainly attitude and sort of certain like speed and recklessness and just sort of assertiveness. Something about that raw energy, that sort of release. It's like a good safe release. Instead of like going out and starting fights with people, you just hammer on a guitar, or play real fast and stomp your feet and shout. And I always love that, and I always do that, and that's, again, I see that sort of line that like punk rock is its own offshoot of folk music.
Yeah.
It is a sort of a very weird, twisted folk music, but it is still a folk tradition. It is people's music.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get a sense of that. Like, I mean, one of my favorite songs that you play, Evil Genius, like, I can hear that as a punk song.
I wrote that as a punk song in college.
Yeah, and so,
I wrote that as a punk song. It was never intended... when I wrote it, originally it was a Bad Religion parody.
And I can see that.
I
can definitely see that.
Lyrics, kind of making fun of them being... And they're all like, oh yeah, we all have PhDs. And they were... I don't know. It's funny because they predate Offspring, that they always felt like a second-rate Offspring to me.
Yeah, oh no, I can
I feel like Offspring's
see that.
finest work eclipses Bad Religion, and there's a lot of people, including a few who know me, who will probably want to hit me over the head with a baseball bat for saying that, but screw them. That's my 2 cents worth, and I'm sticking to it.
So, we're going to, I think, start to wrap up, but I want to ask you to play one more song for us at the end, but I want to get into our, there was another question I wanted to ask you, and of course now I'm blanking on it.
I love seeing this.
Thanks, helpful.
You're welcome.
You're very, very useful. I mean, Steve, we've both been asking questions. Do you have a question for Painless?
No, not particularly.
Helpful to me. Helpful.
I was enjoying the interview.
Right, which is now ending because we have no more questions.
All right. I suppose you'll be wanting the spam mail of the day.
That would be nice, and then get into our album for next week. I do want to thank you for coming on, I'm grateful for you to close out our show with another song. But I do.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great having you on again. Once with the Wasties, and now solo, and we hope to have you on again soon.
All right.
Yeah, I'll be happy to come back.
Spam mail.
Yay. No.
Click here. This is very normal, but this can only be found when the movements of baby are prominently noticeable. The creator on this program has 2 young kids to prove it. For women who want to learn how to get pregnant quickly, it may take a different approach. By one Kikyepe.
You okay?
I'm alright.
You feel okay? You sure?
There was a lot of energy there. but I feel like it was a very rushed kind of production.
See, they started doing this thing where they...
You started it, and we...
by accident, I analyzed the spam mail like a song, and now they do it unironically.
I love it.
Anyway,
do I have a few seconds for shameless self-promotion?
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, please do.
So, if you like any of the songs you've been hearing, the best place for all things Painless Parker related, a good place is my website, which is painlessparkermusic.com. The best place is probably my Facebook page, which obviously is just facebook.com/painlessparker.
Well, sure. We'll make sure Steve puts their Facebook page and your Twitter in the links.
I am on Bandcamp as well. All my songs on Bandcamp can be downloaded either for free, or if you want to pay for them, you can pay as much or as little as you feel like. I'm at the point in my artistic trajectory and career that I'm just happy if somebody's listening to it.
Okay, well that's good.
So, I've been doing the Painless Parker thing maybe 2 years now, which really is in infancy in terms of making it musically. And I've been very, very fortunate to have as much success I have in terms of fans and being able to play shows.
Yeah, you're almost a celebrity at Steampunk. Like when we were there, I mean, people know you. People know you there. You've become kind of a staple. Maybe not a celebrity, but definitely a staple at Steampunk because people recognize you.
The mustache.
Yeah. The only thing about doing an audio...
With a great mustache comes great responsibility, of course.
That's true, just like Uncle Ben said.
It's a tall order.
So check me out on the Facebooks.
Yeah, find them, like them.
Come to the shows. If
you can
you're
find
in the
us.
New York area, I play all the time at the Way Station, Sidewalk, other places.
Yep.
Even the subway.
Even the subway, yes. Recently, I posted the video on the Crash Chords Facebook page. He was recently greeted by, what was it, Serbian step dancers?
Two Serbian girls who were part of an Irish step dancing troupe, and they had their shoes in their backpack, and they heard me playing some jigs, and like, hey, could you play some music while we take a video of our dancing? And it was just one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me in the subway.
That was completely arbitrary, because I saw that
Completely arbitrary.
Video.
They were just on the subway. I had never met these people before.
It looked choreographed.
Yeah, it was completely improvised.
That's insane.
I mean, you just play the right. They just needed a reel, and I can play in 4/4, and they can dance in 4/4.
Yeah. Oh, I love Subway.
And I was playing Southern tunes, not Irish tunes, because all the Irish tunes I know are jigs, and they needed a reel.
Yeah,
they needed 4/4, not 6/8. So,
but that worked really, really well. I mean, the subway.
It was just one of those crazy things.
Acoustic-wise, the acoustics of the subway are absolutely wonderful. I mean, you combine the mandolin with the tapping.
The other nice thing about mandolins, they're nice and loud. They ring out in ways that they cut through the mix a little better than the guitar when you're out in
the guitar
public.
is slightly bigger, but it's much more toned down.
Yeah, it's just in a lower register, and it's a wonderful instrument. I love the guitar, but the mandolin definitely has its niche, has its strong suits, and very fond of it. I'm trying to get better. There's a lot of opportunities for getting better and like playing with other people and learning more folk music in the city that I'm very grateful for.
Nice. Before we start to wrap up, what have you chosen for us for next week, Steve? Is your pick?
No new genres necessarily, but what in my opinion is a unique duo, Goldfrapp. Anyone heard of the name? Goldfrapp?
No.
I know Goldfrapp.
Electronic in their origin. But they've moved toward very different things, toward kind of an alternative sound. It broaches post-rock at times, it broaches folk at times, it broaches a weird rendition of standards, which is, I think, what we'll be getting on their new album, Tales of Us. So listen.
It broaches it, but does it ever lock it?
We'll see.
Before we have you play us out with the last song, why don't you do our sign-off for us? We definitely would appreciate that.
And don't go away, because they'll be playing a song right after.
Music is life. And life is good. When it's too far to walk and your bike's in the shop, well, grab yourself $2.50 and hop on the subway train. On subway train, riding on down the line. Well, if you're feeling kind of frisky and you want to get down, catch a number 3 train and ride to Brooklyn town on subway train. really in the instance whenever if you wanna go to Queens, man, you're gonna wait forever for that subway train. That subway train. Well, that subway train riding on down the line. Well, you gotta check the maps so you know where it'll take you. The 7 goes to Flushing, but it don't go to Jamaica. That's another train. Another subway train. Another subway train riding on down the line. Now if you're looking for adventure, brother, don't make a fuss. Take the F to West 4th where the folks is fabulous on the subway train. On the subway train. Oh my. On the subway train riding on down the line. Well, now the 4 goes to Woodlawn, and that's quite remote. But if you wanna get to Staten, man, you gotta take a boat and not the subway train. Not the subway train. Not the subway train. It don't go down that line. Ride that train line. Oh, if you stay on 6 at the end of the line, you're gonna see a little something that's mighty fine on that subway train. I'm telling you what it is on that subway train. You got to see it for yourself on the subway train, riding on down the line. Well, if you try to jump the turnstile and you ain't got no ticket, the cops are gonna catch you and they tell you where to stick it on the subway train. You ain't riding on no subway train. On the subway train, riding on down the line. You might see a bunch of kids in the b-boy style. When they shout, it's showtime, man, you better clear the aisle on that subway train. It's gonna get wild on that subway train. On that subway train, riding on down the line. Well, my good girl, she told me without no hesitation, baby, won't you come and drive your train into my station? I'm gonna ride that train. Oh, baby, gonna ride that subway train.